Uh, you each have up to 8 minutes to make a presentation, and then the committee members will ask questions of you. We will start off with Mr. Grady. Thank you for coming, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. It's an honor to be here today and be able to talk to you about immigration issues. The backlog is an important issue, but it's not the main important issue. It's really a symptom of an immigration policy in Canada that wasn't working and that was generating large numbers of people that are not able to succeed in Canada's labor market. And it was also something that was growing out of control, which caused the government to take action. I give the government credit with their Bill C-51 for amending the IRPA and implementing the action plan to do something about the backlog. But I think there are real questions about the effectiveness and the efficiency of the action plan. First, there's a lot of issues about the data on the backlog, and good data is necessary in order to make appropriate decisions. You probably noticed that unless they've given you additional data, the main official data was as of December 31st of last year. That was the data used for the consultation. There's been some selective updates provided, but it's very sketchy data, and it doesn't really mesh very well with some of the other data. And I find this a little bit of a puzzle, but you have the global case management system which has been implemented. I'm a little bit surprised that it can't produce reasonable data, and data that will provide information on who the people in these backlogs are, with their age, their sex, their education, where they come from, various things about how long particular groups of them have been in the backlog. It's just kind of overall data that's presented on the length of the backlog, making an unrealistic assumption that no new applications are accepted after March 31st. So I think that you have a hard job here. You really have to probe the government a bit more to get information out of them. And then, of course, there's the real problem. If you consider the backlog to be the main problem, the government has met the objective to a certain extent that they said, in that the pre-2008 federal skilled workers have been roughly halved. But if you look at the overall federal skilled workers and counting the applications that have come after that, it's just gone down just a teeny bit. And worse, the overall backlog is still over 1 million people. So there's been no improvement there. And the question that this raises is, why hasn't the backlog come down? I think that it's obvious. The federal government doesn't really control the intake flow into the backlog. It only controls a small proportion. Quebec has its own program. The federal government has made commitments under the provincial nominee programs, which they think constrains it, and the federal government as a result, the federal government has been relinquishing its ability to control the total numbers under the immigration inflow. So it has only been able to imply ministerial instructions to federally selected economic class immigrants, mainly the federal skilled workers and business immigrants, and that the inflow of these has been cut down to a low level. The latest cutback was to 10,000 per year, and there's a cap on the federal investors program of 700, and the cap was on each of the individual occupational categories. And you can see some of them have already been filled, and we're only 3 months into the year. And then, on the other hand, the backlog of parents and grandparents has increased by almost a half, according to the recent data that the minister gave, that showed that the backlog was 165,000, which was higher than the one that they presented for the consultations. And wait times, of course, for parents and grandparents with no new applicants was already at 7.5 years, so it's probably much higher. Okay, make a few critical observations on the backlog. I think that the backlog has been cherry-picked by the government at this point by applying their ministerial instructions with respect to occupational categories and job offers, and that I think that although I don't have any data on this, those remaining in the backlog are likely to be the least desirable and least likely to succeed in the labor market. And not only that, but they're 5 years older now than they were when they started this process, and they were already disadvantaged in the labor market, so they're even in a worse position. The cap on federal skilled worker applications and the occupational filter is really not a very good way to select immigrants who will make the greatest contribution to the Canadian economy. In my view, it represents an excessively bureaucratic approach to what is a serious economic problem of the poor performance of recent immigrants and the government's lack of success in selecting immigrants who will do well in the labor market. It excludes what may be much more highly qualified new foreign federal skilled worker applicants in favor of the less attractive pre-2008 applicants. And while the arranged employment override is a step in the right direction, it's weighted in favor of temporary foreign workers and doesn't really seem to make very much of a distinction about the quality of the job of the people that are being admitted under the employment override. And then parenting grandparents, well, that's something that's very expensive for Canada. Just to give you a little bit of a number, Dave Dodge and Richard Dion did a study of the health costs in Canada. Their estimate was, taking men and women, the cost per person between the age 65 and 84 would be about $192,500. Well, if you just do a simple arithmetic calculation and apply that to the backlog, that would cost Canada $31.8 billion during the senior years of the people in that backlog. And then living caregivers. This is a program that in the backlog. It's small at 28,000 or 29,000, but I find it very hard to understand why this program survives so long and who the constituency for it is. Given that the main beneficiaries are upper income people who get a subsidy for taking care of their children in a very expensive way of at-home child care, and that 40% of those who come to work for relatives. And then, unlike the other temporary foreign worker programs, these people get full opportunity for full status after 2 years, and they get entitled to bring in their family.
1 minute.
One more minute? Okay, I won't get into this. But just one estimate that we made, Herb and I did an estimate of the cost of immigration. If you apply our number to this backlog, you get a cost of $6 billion a year if you allow all these people in. And also, you can calculate, based on the Statistics Canada data, that if you allow everybody in the backlog in, and they do just as well as the previous 1 million people allowed in, 26.4% of them, or 265,000, will go into poverty. I think it's quite clear that the government's approach for dealing with the backlog isn't working, and the caps are undermining the performance of economic class immigrants by excluding many wanting to apply for immigration now in favor of older immigrants that were taken in under a less demanding selection system. I think that the government needs to restructure its immigration policy in order to maximize the potential economic benefits.
Thank you, Mr. Grady.
Yeah.
Mr.